I rise to offer a couple of comments about the moment that we're in here because I heard a lot of high-minded talk about the U.S. Constitution and our fundamental rights. And, you know, those of you who've had the obligation and responsibility to serve with me for many years know that I love talking about the Constitution and our fundamental rights. In fact, it's one of the things that often I find myself connecting with my conservative colleagues on. But I do want to let you know that all these concepts, separation of powers and fundamental rights, and does what the governor is doing now, does that make us no longer a republic? These types of considerations have been looked at by the Supreme Court in the past. This is not the first pandemic this nation has faced. This is not the first public health crisis we've faced. These questions have been looked at by the Supreme Court. Has anyone here in the chamber read any of the Supreme Court decisions documenting exactly how far the government's power extends in these circumstances and how those boundaries are determined? Some of us have, I suspect. But of course, what I really wanted to say is that this legislation that we debated today, Senate Bill 858, is not going to be upheld or not upheld based on some sort of federal constitutional basis. And I would also say that the resolutions that we're going to take up in a moment are not going to be battled on a federal constitutional basis. These are going to be decided on state laws. You know why? Because this legislature that you are trying to stick up for now, passed a couple of laws. We passed a law in the 70s, an Emergency Manager Act. They passed a law in the 40s, an Emergency Manager Act. And this legislature, this Senate, in fact, in its infinite wisdom, decided many, many years ago that in a situation like this, in a public health crisis, in a genuine emergency, we need to give the governor the power to act swiftly and to act decisively, something that this legislature has shown time and time again that it is not capable of doing. So I also want to mention that, I made an error when I was talking about Senate Bill 858. I said that, it was going to have a hard time in the courts. Of course, that's not true. That was an error. Senate Bill 858 is not going to go to the courts. And it's also the same reason why it's not important whether or not we gave it immediate effect. The governor is not signing a bill taking away the governor's authority. It's as simple as that. It's a political exercise. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator, would you like your remarks printed in the journal? Without objection, that's so ordered. President recognizes Majority Floor Leader MacGregor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate proceed to the order of resolutions.
Without objection, so ordered.
I move that the Senate proceed to Senate Resolution number 114.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, Senators Thomas offers Senate Resolution 114, a resolution authorizing the Senate Majority Leader to commence legal action on behalf of the Senate challenging the governor's authority and actions during the COVID-19 pandemic.
President recognizes Majority Floor Leader MacGregor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Rule 3.204 be suspended for the immediate consideration of Senate Resolution number 114.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, Senate Resolution 114 is a resolution authorizing the Senate Majority Leader to commence legal action on behalf of the Senate, challenging the governor's authority and actions during the COVID-19 pandemic. The rules have been suspended to allow for immediate consideration. There are no amendments pending to the adoption of Senate Resolution 114.
The question is on the adoption of Senate Resolution 114. Is there any discussion? The President recognizes Minority Leader Ananich.
Thank you, Mr. President. Quite often, if you look and listen, you hear the true intent of what's going on often. My good friend and colleague from the 32nd District, I think, articulates exactly the intent of this resolution. It has nothing to do with a lot of the high-minded talk that's going on. It has everything to do with politics and perceived slights that go back all the way to the budget. The budget that, I would remind folks, was not negotiated to the governor. It was put on her desk, and he brought up the actions that brought them displeasure. I have to say, in the middle of a global pandemic, are we that petty? Is our ego that fragile that we can't find ways to sit down and reason as men and women across the aisle and find solutions? That this is our only avenue? I disagree with the majority of what my good friend from the Southwest Michigan said. But I will say there are a number of things we can work on together. Availability of testing so that we can open up our state in an appropriate and safe way. Making sure that all workers and business owners have PPE, not if it's available, but guarantee it, so that we protect every single worker in this state before they go back to work. Work in a collaborative way to solve our problems. I ask that we do that instead of what we're doing here today, and I ask that remarks be printed in the record. Thank you very much.
Without objection, so ordered. President recognizes Senator Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to offer my no vote explanation on Senate Resolution 114, and I ask that my remarks be printed in the Journal.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. This resolution today is a resolution to, quote, commence legal action on behalf of the Senate, challenging the authority and the actions of our governor and the executive branch generally taken during the COVID-19 pandemic. I am going to oppose this resolution for a number of reasons. One, as I stated earlier, I think that the claims made in the whereas clauses about constitutional violations are not founded in the document and really don't stand up to any, we'll say, strict scrutiny. But what I want to point out is that as this Senate is debating a resolution to commence legal action, which means hire expensive lawyers, we are on the precipice, really maybe we are in the middle of falling off of a budget cliff. In a few weeks, we're going to have a consensus revenue estimating conference, and the news is not going to be good. We all know that we're going to have to right-size this budget to the situation at hand, and it's going to be very, very dangerous. And at the same time as this Senate is talking about spending precious dollars on expensive lawyers for a political legal fight, Mitch McConnell in the U.S. Senate is saying he's not so interested in a blue state bailout. He doesn't care about states like Michigan that have been hit hard by COVID-19. He's talking about not providing federal funds to help make sure that we can keep our healthcare workers, our teachers, and our police officers paid and on the street. He'd rather spend money bailing out Carnival Cruises that doesn't even dock here in America, airlines that spent all their coin on stock buybacks. He'll throw billions at them, but when the people of Michigan need a little bit of help to make sure that we can have schools open, police officers on the street, garbage collectors picking up the garbage, our cities need help. Our state employees are facing a disaster. And here we are talking about hiring a bunch of fancy lawyers to advance a political cause. It's disappointing. I oppose it. And I would take it, I wouldn't be saying any of this. I would not for a second say that you shouldn't stand up for your views and spend a whole bunch of public money doing it. If you were coming forward in the previous weeks or even here today and saying, let's get together, let's talk about how we can provide PPE to these employees, let's talk about how we can provide testing, let's talk about how we can help the governor get these unemployment checks into people's hands, let's talk about contract tracing or small business help. No, you're here talking about suing the governor, hiring fancy lawyers rather than getting to work, rolling up your sleeves, helping the people of Michigan. Thank you, Mr. President.